Charlie Kirk often cited the stunning rates of violent crime amongst black men and asked the question, why? Most interpreted it as an inference to a genetic predisposition to violence. But he was actually pointing to a cultural disease, the same disease Malcolm was trying to cure through the Islamic faith. Where Charlie fell short was in his assumption that the audience was of an intelligence necessary to correctly identify the problem. Malcolm fell short in his unwillingness to accept black complicity in the illness. Both agreed on the solution: God. The disease isn't exclusive to black people, but it is most obvious there. It contains a lot of components and manifests differently according to socioeconomic class, but it can be summarized as life without meaning. In black communities, poverty is typically the driver. In white communities, it's driven by excess, but it alternates between drivers depending on socioeconomic status, not race. In poor communities, it presents as addiction to alcohol and street drugs, hypersexuality, crime, and violence. In middle-class and wealthy communities, it presents as alcohol and prescription drug abuse, manic depression, antisocial behavior, and sociopathy. In poor communities, it's expressed outwardly. That's why it's easier to spot. In middle-class and wealthy communities, it's expressed inwardly. That's why it's usually missed until it's too late. But no matter who you are or where you reside, the disease is always the same. We're all sick, seeking to fill a void with material wealth and shiny objects that promise relief but never deliver. Charlie Kirk and Malcolm X accurately diagnosed the illness as a chronic spiritual gap. This is why both men were murdered. Their shooters may not have known it at the time, but they were symptomatic flare-ups of the cultural disease. There is a prevalence of evil forces who are deeply invested in keeping us sick. God cannot be the answer because it's the only remedy. Divisive slop is constantly poured into the mosh pit of public discourse to keep us detached from the unifying magnetism of the divine. Charlie Kirk and Malcolm X were at times guilty of jumping on pieces of scrap meat within the chaos, but it was when they set themselves apart that they became truly dangerous. Both men appeared to be maturing into something less radical and more moderate when they died. They were aware of how they'd been weaponized to further the agendas of powerful interests, groups they were once aligned with until they saw how the sausage was made. It's no coincidence they were snatched from the physical world right as they were reaching a turning point. It was never about race or gender or even religion. It's always been about keeping us alive just enough to host the virus, and anyone who has a clear view of the illness must be surgically removed.